Hi everyone, in this video we'll create a small web application which has a registration form, and we use JSP Servlet JDBC and MySQL technology stack to develop this web application. So we'll build a simple employee registration module using JSP Servlet JDBC and MySQL database. Alright, so we'll be using ModelViewController design pattern to develop this web application. So before getting developing this web application, I would like to give a little bit overview of ModelViewController design pattern. Alright, so look at here the high level diagram of ModelViewController design pattern. So once we hit a URL in a web browser, so based on the URL it will call the corresponding controller. So controller consists of servlets. So servlet will basically process the HTTP request, and it will invoking the model data, and at the back end we use MySQL database. So database layer, so we have one more layer, that is a DAO layer. So DAO layer will query data from the database, and it will store that data into a model, and controller will invoke that model, and controller will send that model data to the JSP page, and JSP page again will be rendered on a web browser with the model data. So this is the typical flow in a ModelViewController design pattern. So what is a ModelViewController design pattern? So ModelViewController design pattern is a pattern used in software engineering to separate the application logic from the user interface. As the name implies, the MUC pattern has three layers. So model layer defines the business layer of the application, and the controller layer manages the flow of the application, and the view layer defines the presentation layer of the application. So I will show you how these layers works with an example bit later. So just focus what the model layer does, and what is the responsibility of controller layer and the view layer. Alright, now let's come to the example. So we will develop this employee register form through which employee can register to the web application. Alright, so look at here the fields: first name, last name, username, password, address, and contact number. So employee will enter all these fields, and once hit the submit button, so this request will be, so this is the basically HTTP post request. So this request will be handled at a servlet. So servlet will handle this HTTP post request, and it will process the request parameters, and it will create an employee object using model layer, and it will forward that model data to the DAO layer, and DAO layer will have a connection with the MySQL database, and it will store the data into MySQL database. So we'll see this in an example. So let's have a look into the tools and technologies that we will be using. So we'll use we'll use JSP, and we use Eclipse IDE to develop this web application, and we use JDK 1.8 or later, and we'll be using Apache Tomcat 8.5, and we use JSTL and Servlet API. Alright, and we also use MySQL JDBC connector to connect to the MySQL database using JDBC API. So let's have a look into the development steps. So this is a very useful section because it outlines what we are going to implement in this video tutorial. So first we create a Eclipse dynamic web project. Next we add all the jar dependencies. Next we create a project structure. Next we create we set up the MySQL database, and next we create a Java bin, that is an employee. Next we create an employee DAO class. Next we create an employee servlet, and next we create an employee register.jsp page. Next we create an employee detail.jsp page, and finally we have a demo. Alright, so as I mentioned, we are using a ModelViewController design pattern. So employee bin, it acts as a model layer, and employee DAO, it is a DAO layer. Employee servlet, it acts as a controller layer, and employee register and employee details, these two JSP pages are acts as a view layer. Alright, now let's implement these steps one by one. So first we need to create a dynamic web project in Eclipse IDE. So before that we need to set up the database, right? So here is the DDL script. So this is the employee table. It has ID, first name, last name, username, password, address, and contact fields. Alright, so we can just copy this DDL script, and we can execute in a MySQL workbench. So I am in a MySQL workbench, so let me create a fresh database. So just type create database and give database name here as employees, and execute this query. So this will create a database and database name is employees. Alright, so look at here employees, and under employees database we create a table. So this is the DDL script for employee table, and we just execute this DDL script. Just select the employees database here and execute it. Yeah, here we go, we have successfully created employee table. Just refresh here. So look at here, we have created an employee table. Now our database setup is ready. Now let's have a look into the next step. So this fourth step we have already done, because we need to set up the database before creating the application. So now we can create a Eclipse dynamic web project. Alright, so I highly suggest you guys to start coding with me, so that we can implement this tutorial together and you will learn coding, and yeah, there is a lot of fun. Okay, so just switch to the Eclipse IDE and let's create a dynamic web project. So I am in a Eclipse IDE now. In order to create a dynamic web project, go to the file, new, and choose dynamic web project, and here just give a project name as registration JSP Servlet JDBC example. Okay, hit finish. Now we have created a dynamic web project. So look at the default project structure here. So we have a content folder, we have a init folder, and inside a web init folder we have a lib folder. So inside a lib folder we add the required dependencies, that is the jar files, and web content basically we store pages, JSP pages, and other resources like JS files and CSS files. Okay, once we create the project, let's have a look into the next step. So next step is we need to add all the jar dependencies. Alright, so under lib folder let's just add these 4 dependencies: JSP API, JSTL, MySQL connector Java, and Servlet API. So don't worry, once we'll complete this tutorial, I will host the source code of this tutorial on GitHub repository. So I will provide a link in a video description, so that you can able to download the jar files as well as the whole project. Okay, now we have added all the jar dependencies. Let's have a look into the next step. Next step is we need to create a project structure. So right click on src folder, new, and create a package structure. Give package name as net.javaguides. And this is the registration module, so give name as a registration. Hit finish, and let's create a few more packages. Create a model package, and let's create a controller package. Let's create a DAO package. Alright, so as I mentioned earlier, we are using ModelView design pattern, right? So we have a model layer in place, controller layer in place. Now we create a view layer. So just create a folder under web, and let's name this folder as views. Okay, so views folder contains JSP pages. So once we have a model layer, controller layer, and view layer in place, next let us see the next step. So next step is we need to set up the database. So this step we have already done, and the next step is we need to create an employee Java bin class. So under model package, just right click, new, and class, and name it as an employee. So inside an employee class, let's create private fields: first name, last name, employee, username, password, address, and contact. and right click and let's create a getter setters. Right click, source, getter setter methods. Yeah, here we go. So once we create a private fields, we need to create a getter setter methods to access these private fields, right? So once the employee class is in place, now let us see the next step. So we need to create an employee DAO class. So right click on DAO package, new, and choose class, and let's name it as a employee DAO. So in this class we basically write a JDBC code to connect to the MySQL database, and we store the employee registered data into MySQL database. So let me quickly write this code here. So look at here, we have just created a register employee method, and we are passing here employee object, and this is the insert statement, insert SQL statement, and here we are using try with resource statement. And here we are connecting to the MySQL database using JDBC URL and username and password. It's pretty simple, right? And here once we got the JDBC connection object, then we create a prepare statement and we pass the SQL statement here, and look at here the placeholders inside a SQL statement, and so this is the prepare statement, so we can set placeholder values by using these APIs. Alright, and then we execute the prepare statement using execute update method. So this method will return an integer, that is the number of records inserted. Alright, so pretty simple. So we basically connect to the MySQL database using JDBC URL, user and password, and we create the prepare statement object, and we execute the prepare statement object. Alright, very simple DAO code. Now let's have a look into the next step, employee servlet. Now let's right click on controller package, new, and let's create a servlet, and name it as a employee servlet. Okay, now we have created a servlet. So what we will do, we will just configure Apache Tomcat server to the class path of this project. So in previous video I have shown you how to configure Apache Tomcat server in Eclipse. Now go to the project, right click here, build path, configure build path, and here click on add variable, and no, not add variable, just click on add library and choose server runtime next, and choose this Apache Tomcat 8.5, hit finish. Now we have added Apache Tomcat server to the class path of this project. Hit apply and close. Now you can see, so few of the jar files are required from the Apache Tomcat server to this application. So now you can see the errors are gone here. Okay, now we have employee servlet in place. Now let's go ahead and let's write the logic. So we need to handle the HTTP post request, right? So here we need to write the code inside a do post method. So first we'll create employee DAO class object. Okay, and here let's remove this code, and here just get the request parameters, string first name equal to request dot get param, and you can get first name from the request parameter. Alright, so just copy this statement and paste here and just access the last name from the request param and copy this, and similarly get all the request parameters. So look at the employee class. So here we have username, password, and we have address, contact, that's all. Alright, so once we got all the request parameters from request object, now we can create a employee object. Okay, and just set the employee object with all the data, first name, employee dot last name, employee username, employee password, employee address, and employee contact. Here we go. So once we create the employee object, then we can call employee DAO method, employee DAO dot register employee, and then we can pass an employee object like this. Here we go. Alright, so once we store the employee object into MySQL database, then we need to redirect, right? So for that just call redirect method here, send redirect, and here you need to pass the JSP pages. So we'll create a JSP pages and then we'll add here. So for time being, just keep empty. So later once we create the JSP pages, then we can give name here. Okay, it's pretty simple servlet, right? So we have created a model layer, and we have created a controller layer now, and we have also created a DAO layer. Now it's time to create a view layer. Right, now let's create a JSP pages. So right click on views folder, new, and then choose a JSP file and give JSP page name as a employee register.jsp page. Hit finish. Now here we need to design the HTML form. Alright, so let me quickly design this HTML form and then I will explain you. Okay, so it's pretty simple. So we have HTML form here, and this is the action, and this is the post. Alright, and look at here the URL register. So we need to map this URL with the servlet. So here we need, so by default this URL is mapped here. Now replace this with the register. So once we hit the submit button, then this servlet will be called, and that form data will be handled in this servlet. Okay, so look at the method. So method is very important. We are using post method here. So in order to send the form data, we usually use HTTP post method here. Okay, and look at the fields: first name and last name, username, password, address, and contact number. Perfect, right? So you can see here in a model, that is the employee class, we are using the same number of fields, and under JSP also we are using same fields. This makes sense, right? So very simple form, and we have created a HTML table to render these text fields in a proper format. And finally we have submit button. So once we hit the submit button, this form data will be sent to the servlet. Okay, so now we have a employee registered.jsp page. Okay, so once the form data will be stored in a MySQL database, then we need to redirect it to some other page. So for that, let's create one more JSP page. Right click, new, and choose a JSP file, and just give a name as employee detail.jsp. Hit finish, and here we just display a success message. Okay, so once the employee registered successfully, then we can display the employee successfully registered, like this. So before deploying this application, so first I would like to give you some tips here. So look at here, we have only one servlet, but we need to handle two requests. So first we need to handle the employee register.jsp page. So once we hit some link, let us say HTTP GET request, then this single servlet will handle both a GET request as well as POST request. Alright, so we haven't implemented doGet method yet. Let's go ahead and let's implement it first. So in the doGet method, we need to create a dispatcher servlet which will forward the request to the corresponding JSP page. Okay, now look at here, we are forwarding request to this JSP page. Okay, and one more thing is, whenever when we submit the form, and this post will be executed in a servlet, and here we no need to send a redirect method. So we have to use request dispatcher to forward the request to the corresponding JSP page. So let's use here employee details. So once we have done some changes, let's go ahead and let's deploy this application, and let's see the demo. Right click, run on server, hit finish. Hopefully this application will deploy successfully. Let us see if there are any errors or exception on a console. No errors, no exceptions. Alright, now our application is up and running. Now let's create a proper URL. So open your favorite browser and just hit this link. So make sure that this register, you should enter this register here, because it will map this HTTP GET request with the servlet, and hit enter. Yeah, here we go. So employee register form will be open. So let me explain you the flow. So this is the HTTP GET request, and this will map in a servlet here. Okay, and so this is the get method, so it will call to get method here, and it will forward this request to the employee register.jsp page. And this is the employee register form, so that we have seen in a browser, right? So this is the employee register form. It will display here, and just we fill up the form here, first name, last name, username, and password. You can enter any password that you want, and fill up address and contact name, and hit submit. Yeah, here we go. The employee data form data has successfully stored in a MySQL database, and we have got a success web page here. Let's go ahead and let's verify in a MySQL workbench. So this is the employees database. Inside that we have an employee table that we have created previously, and let me refresh. Yeah, here we go. So look at here, the record is inserted in a MySQL database table. So this is how basically we create a web application which has an employee registration form using JSP Servlet JDBC and MySQL. Alright, so I hope you found this video tutorial useful, and we have also used a ModelViewController design pattern to to structure our web application. Alright, so if you find this video tutorial useful, then subscribe to our YouTube channel so that whenever I will publish such videos you will get notified. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.